Today on the show, strategy plus action equals purposeful reinvention. Success in business and life is a constant back and forth of charting your course and taking the consistent steps every day to move you forward. Both are critical. My guests on this show range from hardworking entrepreneurs starting from scratch to visionary leaders of cutting-edge companies looking to scale. I help you understand the strategies that are working for them and the actions you can take to model their success. For me, a show like this is all about joining forces with my guests to dig deep and create something new for you. Whether that's a small insight to get you unstuck or a path of massive growth through customized marketing and creative sales initiatives. Welcome to Strategy in Action. Welcome to episode 27 of Strategy in Action. Today on the show, we've got the great Michelle Hecht, and we are talking reinvention. Now, this topic is so important because we're not talking about like, oh, I want to change careers or I want to do this thing I've always wanted, and then here's the 5 steps and you go do it. We really go deep on this topic because we get beyond those 1, 2, 3 steps of doing something and dig into what's going to come up, why it's difficult, and give you a good understanding that when you make a decision like this, or it's made for you, that it's time to reinvent or else, right? Here's what's going to happen. Here's why it's going to be hard. Here's why you're going to doubt yourself. And it's okay, and here's what to do after that. And when you go through this and what to do next and take those first, second, and third steps. Michelle's story is so powerful. You're really going to be impressed with, where she's come, what she went through in 2019 and where she's come now and how she's following that calling, that decision for reinvention, and being really purposeful with it and helping others do that same thing along the way by being her vulnerable, honest, open self and making sure that her clients and all of us here on the show know that it's okay to be that way and to go through those painful times and come out the other side. So let's jump in with Michelle Hecht. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the show, Michelle Hecht.
How are you?
Michelle is, one of those examples that I have many of that just kind of connect just on LinkedIn in some other area that is just like, you know what? I don't know why we should connect. Let's connect and chat. And Michelle, I think you have a very similar sort of mindset. That's why we kind of jumped on a call last week and connected there.
It was wonderful. Like we were just talking about everything under the sun. It was great conversation. So glad we did that.
Yeah, me too. And there's so much benefit. I preach that to everyone who will listen of the value of connecting. I was on a call yesterday and there's such a negative connotation to the word networking and all of that. And I understand the negative connotation, but don't throw everything out with just that context. Like there's such value in just meeting new people, sharing ideas. Hey, how can we come together and create something better or introduce people to other people? I love it. So, this is an example of that. So I'm so glad that's working out. And with everything that you've got going on, from what I've seen on LinkedIn, what we talked about the other day, I thought you are the perfect person to talk about this subject today of purposeful reinvention. And sometimes we're forced into that. And it's not so purposeful. we better reinvent ourselves, right?
Exactly.
We're forced into some kind of role, circumstances beyond our control maybe. But a lot of times we feel that pull, and maybe we felt it for 20 something years. Maybe we've only felt it a month, but we know something has to change. And I would love to kind of dig into this topic with you on when you feel that tug, what do you do, and go through that. And before we get too completely deep into that subject, though, give us some background, corporate to now to what you're doing now and how you're helping people.
Thank you so much. What a great intro. Just things I love talking about, especially reinventing ourselves, with purpose and intention. So my story, I spent over 20 years in corporate sales as an individual contributor. as a sales leader and coaching and training and basically carrying like two different roles at the same time for most of my career. I carried very heavy and aggressive quotas and metrics that I had to meet, but I developed a love early on for coaching other people and for training and for doing things on a larger scale. So it was a mixed bag. Pharmaceuticals for many, many years, working for large companies, small companies. The bulk of it was in women's healthcare, which I loved. And I always felt that tug that you talk about. But I wasn't ready to completely walk away from that and pursue coaching or training because I felt I had the best of both worlds. I'm in charge of running my own business, so to speak, as a sales professional. And then I get to do all of that on a local or a regional or a national level when possible. But I had to make a big, significant change because I went through a layoff in 2019. And that was a turning point for me. I could go back to what I was comfortable doing and what I knew like the back of my hand, or I could pivot and finally embrace what I feel and what I felt at the time was my purpose. Because when you get that pull, right, that nag, human beings usually don't act on that right away. Like we pacify it. Like, okay, like I see you there, and maybe it's real and maybe it's not, but I see you. I'm just going to leave you there over in the corner for a while, right?
Right.
After all those years, that was the final like pull. And I started making some significant changes in my life back in 2019. And I started pursuing what I absolutely love to do. And so here I am almost 2 years later, and I'm finally embracing what I feel is my genuine, authentic self by coaching and training people, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's in groups. I'm hosting like a fireside chat, kind of like a happy hour now that I just rolled out. And I just want to do things on a larger scale to show people that there's a better way to sell. There's a better way to do business, and that human connection is not just a trendy phrase, that it embodies everything that you just said, the way that you and I connected on LinkedIn, the way that we just started having a conversation. There's a very negative connotation surrounding sales and selling and networking and relationship building. We always go to the negative used car salesman type of deal, from years and years ago. The world has changed. The buyer experience has changed. The seller experience has changed. And I think that the communication dynamic has changed. And I'm here for it all.
Oh, yeah. That's great. And I really, even in our limited interactions, you exude all of that, right? Like that comes across. And that's why, I really wanted to bring you on to talk about, certainly this subject, but also give some of those insights too around your expertise of sales and all of that. And I'm assuming that's where you're coaching, consulting folks is in the sales arena.
Yeah, mostly sales and leadership, but it's not very linear. A lot of people, I get stuck on this sometimes, still to this day. People will ask me, like, what do you do? What do you specialize in? My background is all sales and sales leadership. However, it's not like tunnel vision. There are so many other things factored into that. So I'm like a hybrid of a sales coach and a life coach, because it embodies all these lessons, all these things and nuggets I've picked up along the way, and picking things apart, what works, what doesn't work, what's effective, what's impactful. So yeah, it's like a mutant, Yeah,
a mutant for good. Yeah.
For good, of course.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because it's they're always tied. Whether you want to separate those things or not, too bad. Like who you are at your core is going to come in no matter what you do, but especially something as open and interactive as sales and all of that. So I love that you're combining that, and you're not running from that. You're not shoving that over like, hey, it's all one big package. Let's dig into it. Yeah. I want to ask really quickly from the background, what was that tug? Was it a tug to do something else, or was it a tug to get away from what you were doing?
That's a great question, Jason. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a little bit of both, but if I had to choose which one was more significant, it was running away from what I knew wasn't working. And I talk about this a lot. I've shared a lot about this on interviews and panel discussions and, just even person to person, right? You start realizing that you are not being your authentic self. You get to a point where, whether it's imposter syndrome, whether it's overthinking how you should hold yourself and speak and act and look, depending on which situation you're in, it starts to shift from what you're talking about and what you're doing to how can I mold myself into what I feel this audience wants to see and this audience wants to see. And when you do that over and over again, you start losing your own clarity about who you are. And that's what happened.
Yeah. But okay, so walk me through a little bit of how that was showing up, because on the surface, my initial reaction is, well, yeah, we all do that, right? You communicate a different way for different audiences. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. Was it the wrong in it for you, or not feeling right? Was it because who you were being in this situation or that situation wasn't you?
Again, awesome question. It was a combination of feeling that I wasn't really embracing my authentic self in so many conversations, in meetings. I mean, anywhere I showed up, I felt like you have to act this way, you have to look this way, you have to speak this way. And it wasn't that anybody was doing this to me to knock me down. I was in a very heavily regulated industry. And no matter what I did or said, you had to be compliant, you had to speak, directly to, because everything was regulated by the FDA, and you're talking about medications and human lives and everything like that. So I understood that, but there were so many opportunities that I felt I could have injected more of, like, who I am, my personality, the fact that I'm a very well-rounded individual with many varied interests. And I felt that it was very linear. And I was also checked by a couple of managers years and years ago. I was told by one manager to tone it down. I got the job, and then we were at a sales meeting, and I was so excited to be there. And I'm a very outgoing, animated, girl from New York. And this manager pulled me aside and said to me, listen, now that you're here and you're hired, there are lots of like C-suite executives around, you right now, because this is a national meeting. You need to really tone it down. Oh, that stuck with me for years, that I had to think about, no matter what situation I was in, do I let people see that I'm a very passionate, outgoing, energizing person, or do I downplay it? That's just one example, but it was a lot of that. Yeah,
but that's a big one, though. That's one of those anchor times, like you said, you've kept with you all these years, because that's one of those things that hits. It's almost like, being told something as a child in that place of just like, oh, and then it anchors in, and you don't even like process it until years later and go, wait a second, that's insane. I shouldn't have, and to come out of that and like, okay, it's the wrong environment for me.
100%. 100%.
Yeah, and so how were you? So you had the sales role, but then you did have the coaching, consulting. You were helping in that way. What didn't mesh though for you? Like it wasn't fully scratching that itch.
When I would coach my peers, whether they were tenured sales professionals or they were new hires, that close interaction, one-on-one, I allowed myself to be myself. And slowly I started to realize that those personal connections where people know that you're genuinely interested in helping them and helping them develop into better sales professionals, and you care, I started realizing early on that my effect on people on an intimate level was really powerful. And that gave me validation, and it gave me a better understanding. And it just gave me more confidence that the other stuff really wasn't genuine and that this was where it was at. And then I did it, with teams, and I did it across the region. And then I did it on a national level. I was selected as a point person to speak or do a workshop or, just help people and show people what good looks like, sharing best practices at meetings. So I think that countered the other stuff, which in retrospect was very healthy. It was very good for me.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, to have that outlet, because so here's this, it gave you oxygen during the stifling time.
Life, right?
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, enough to keep you alive. But I think that's such a great entrance into what you're doing now too, because you may have had the urge to go and do this other stuff, but without the step-by-step, validation. And then it grew into this and grew like, oh, okay, not just my knowledge in sales, but who I am when I do all of this. This is my jam. This is okay, good. So then 2019 rolls around. This, the layoffs happen. We all know, anybody's going to go hire a salesperson, you're not going to worry for employment, but that was a time for you to say, okay, I'm at a crossroads. Like I'm either going to take that safe stifling path or fully embrace what I can feel is in me to go do. How scary was it? How determined? What was that point, that crossroads point for you?
If I had to only speak to that particular situation about that pivot, I can't sit here and say that I would have done it. There were other factors that played into that pivot. My 2019 was many people's 2020, if you know what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
My 2019 came with a layoff in early in the year. It came with a car crash that I was in with my children, where the car was completely demolished and beyond repair. I was driving my mother-in-law's car because she was fighting stage 4 lung cancer. She couldn't drive anymore. I got laid off, so I had to return my company car. So I was going to get a new car. I was just waiting to see how things played out. So I was driving her car that day with my kids to go out to see her and visit. Got into that crash. 2 weeks after that crash, she passed away.
Oh, goodness.
I started working at a company in the city, in New York City, and I loved the opportunity. But because I got injured, I had to leave after working there for a month. And I wasn't there long enough for them to pay out disability. So that was a wash. And then my husband was affected with his career a few months later. And then we had just lost my brother-in-law at 45 years old, leaving behind a wife and 2 young children. And then my mother-in-law, and we lost a cousin, leaving behind a wife and a young son. It was one of the most unbelievable years that I look back and I'm like, I don't know how I made it, but I did. I kept going and I fell down so many times. And then I started doing the work from inside. And I said, you know what? I can't rely on external factors to pull me out of this. So I need to figure out a way to do it myself. And then I started doing the work from the inside, and I started reaching out on LinkedIn to people and having conversations with nothing. I didn't want anything from them. I just wanted conversations. I wanted to take it all in. I started reading books. I started networking, our definition of networking. And I started doing the work. And then it's hard to talk about sometimes, but it's good to talk about it. I surrounded myself with really positive people, strong people that I admired and I looked up to, that I really felt could help guide me. I didn't surround myself with people that brought me down and sucked all my energy. And my turning point was actually last year when the pandemic started. The pandemic started a week after this happened. My friends and I took a long weekend in Denver because we wanted to go see Oprah on tour. And we went for the weekend. And when we got there, my girlfriend said, I hooked us up with VIP tickets. So not only are we, going to do a meet and greet with her, she's going to come in and talk to just our group of a couple of hundred people. And there were 15,000 people at the Pepsi Center. This was 200 people.
Oh my goodness.
And a meet and greet and a photo opportunity. And
wow.
And I felt like I was training my whole life for that, because when it was my turn to go up and talk to her, I wasn't going to be that fangirl like, oh my God, Oprah, selfie. It was when I told her this whole story, but I told it in about 45 seconds, like I would as a pharma rep when the doctor comes out of the office and you've got like 45 seconds to make an impact, to tell something. Yeah. So that's what I did. And the woman took her glasses off and held my hands and started to cry. And I was like,
goodness.
Wow. And so we had a conversation that shouldn't have taken more than 2 minutes, took about 11 minutes. And she gave me some solid advice. And she took an extra picture with me and she put her hands over her heart. And I looked at her like, why? And she said, you're going to look back at this picture one day and you're going to remember that I said to you that you're all heart. And from that day forward, that was March 6th, 2020. I got back to New Jersey, where I live now, and I said, I am never playing small again. And from that day forward, I changed the trajectory of my entire life. And that was my turning point. That was the pivot that I needed, because I don't know if I would have done it. I would have tried to play it safe.
So
wow,
that's incredible.
Long answer, but thorough answer. Seriously.
That's huge. And it's so important because we usually get the glossy answer, right? Just like, oh, this happened. And I decided to go on my own. And then, it's been great, I will
never say that. I always tell people how low I was and how I felt. Yeah. And I joke around. I say, if rock bottom had a basement, I found it. Seriously.
And that's the thing. That's what's so important too, because then it becomes a story that is, oh, wow, if Michelle did this from that place,
right?
Okay, maybe I can dig my way to this next level. Maybe I can figure this out. Before we leave that, I think that's just an incredible story with Oprah. And I mean, I'm going to dig into several parts of that, but the Oprah portion of it, what were some of those words that, like, besides that ending, which was so powerful, that 11-minute conversation, what were some of those things of advice or stuff that she gave you?
Sure. After I told her my story, and obviously not my whole story, but just what was going on, like the last year and a half, she said to me, there's a reason why you're still here. Everybody has a purpose, everybody has a why, but you have to believe that your why, your purpose is real, and you have to pursue it. And sometimes it takes a lot longer than you'd like it to. But she used this metaphor. She's like, you have to keep laying your bricks one by one by one. It doesn't matter how long it takes. All that matters is that you're going in the direction that you're trying to get to. And she just, basically validated my why and told me that I've come this far, and that there are many people out there that will quit somewhere in the middle, or they'll quit right before big things happen. But she said that nothing is happening by accident, and there's a reason why things progress, that one thing leads to another. And I've been saying that for a long time now, like a ripple effect. Mm-hmm. I really believe that, I really believe that. And when I look back now and I see how things panned out, I can almost connect the dots and explain to myself why this happened at this date. And then it led to this. So she validated that and just really emphasized on momentum. And I guess she really felt something in that conversation, because the fact that she started to cry and then took that picture with her hand over her heart, she also reinforced the fact that I do things leading with my heart, and that will never steer me wrong.
Yeah. And to embrace that as the superpower that it is. Yeah.
because I questioned that a lot back then. Like, am I too much of an empath, and am I too soft, and are people not taking me seriously because I am all heart? And I used to try to downplay that because that wasn't strong in business. Don't show your weakness. That's BS. I'm sorry. It is.
Yeah. That's one of those areas that you can shine and stand apart, in that world, that sea of sameness and logic, right? That's huge. So this brings up a really, really interesting point, and such a great point on this topic of reinvention, because that's another aspect that I think when you watch it from the stands, I made a decision to do this, and then I was there, right? And when I think that stops people from a complete reinvention, because what we see in our head is where we want to go and be, and that is so far away most of the time that we don't see the first step, right?
Yeah.
So what was that for you when you were like, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but this is my path now. This is where the direction I need to go. What was that step one for you?
My step one was paying more attention to how I felt in that moment versus what I think in any moment. And I understand that, like you mentioned before, you have like logic on this side, right? And emotion on this side. And I think that there are so many people out there that are under so much pressure to either choose one, at least in their career, or if they want to choose both, they don't know the algorithm. They don't know how much am I allowed to inject of the emotional piece. Because if I go too far, that will affect the logical piece, and then it might affect, how people see me as being credible, and it might affect my long-term plans with this company or with my career or whatnot. So we overthink, and that's what I did for so many years. Because when you're in a very structured environment and you're supposed to really use a lot of logic, I had to study such intense information and constantly being tested. It was medical information and all kinds of clinical trials, and discuss these very clinical issues with physicians. And when you have to do that, there's no room to be emotional and to be funny or silly or talk about other things. You're under the gun. You have limited time. So I felt like I was trained to only be that way. But I knew that the tug was like, Michelle, you're an emotional creature. You're an animated, passionate, outgoing, funny, like you've got all these things, and you're stifling all of them for the sake of this. And at what cost?
Right. Yeah. And that goes back to what I, tell people, anybody who will listen, of just, I'm so much in the camp of build your strengths, screw your weaknesses, for the most part. Is a big blanket statement, right? Rather than, oh, I'm really struggling this. No, you gotta, like, I don't want to go get better at, the nitty gritty and data and analysis of things, even though that's an important aspect of business and marketing and all of that. I want to work with someone who's good at that, at logistics, at all of this. I want to stay in this area, right? And like you're talking about on the emotional side of things, you just get so much further in life, and that gets stronger. You get better. Yeah. Others are better around you. That's so important.
It's scary. And I think a lot of people hold back from taking that big leap of faith because, like you said before, even if they don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, but they still feel the pull, it's so difficult not to think about all the what ifs. What if I fail? What if people judge me? What if it doesn't work out for me? And what if I let people down? And what if I was wrong? And what if I'm not successful? And there's so many what ifs. And that's the stuff that comes in, that it's very difficult to block out. It seeps in, and we go with it, and it takes over. It takes over.
Yeah. And one of the biggest things to happen to me probably around age 40, and I'm just so grateful wherever it came from. But just like all of a sudden, this was like, I looked up and was like, I don't give a shit what anybody thinks. Like, what am I doing? Right? Like, and that was a massive shift that led to hosting shows and networking, being that connector that I've always wanted to be. And like, it just opened the floodgates. And I don't know if it was an age thing or just time for me to do that or what it was.
It's a combination of all of that. But I always talk about that. Like after 40, you're like, you know what the definition of insanity is? Thinking that this is all going to change and have a different outcome, and it's not. So I might
exactly,
it, you know.
Oh totally. Yeah,
I couldn't agree with you more.
So, and I think this is because that there's so many blocks to people answering that tug and reinventing themselves, and I want to go this direction, and part of that, you've got overwhelm because it's way over there and I'm here. How in the world do I even get there? Or it seems like, so even if I know how to get there, it's just so much all at once, right? I have an issue with that just on any projects. I just like, it's just all at once. So I have to get really purposeful with let me just do this right now, step by step. And then also it is I don't know what to do. Right. What's your advice on finding, for somebody to find their first step? What's that best approach?
It's ironic that you bring this up, because the way that you just described how you felt, I felt the same way. I was so stuck and so intimidated, because in my mind, it was like, okay, you have to start a business. Maybe you want to get an LLC. You have to have a website. You have to have a game plan for marketing and advertising. You have to have some sort of lead generation. You have to make videos. You have to post consistently on LinkedIn. You have to network. You have to create content. I thought I was going to, I don't even know what, but that shut me down, because if it's forced, it's not real. And here I am saying to myself, well, I'm finally going to take this big step, and I should be so excited. But the fear of getting involved in all of that and trying to untangle all of that was crippling to me. So in retrospect, I would say the first step is the hardest. Once you make that first step and you realize that, oh, wow, I put the tip of my toe in the water, and look, my toe is still there and I didn't burn myself. I'm going to put my whole toe in. Now I'm going to put half my foot. Now I'm going up to my ankle and my calf and my knee, and holy cow, I'm okay. So it's that first step. But before you take that first step, you have to get real with yourself. And you have to say, I'm in this for the long game. I don't have to have it all figured out within a month or 3 or 6. I'm going to take the first step. And like you mentioned before about being intentional and purposeful, allow yourself to take the first step and just get one thing accomplished, whatever that is. For me, that was, I'm going to take the first step and I am going to put myself out there in my own voice. And I'm not going to worry about what people want to hear or what the expectations are, or I have to explain my transition. I'm not starting over from day one. I am an accumulation of the last 20 some odd years that I've been working and experiencing life and business. So it's making the decision that I'm going to take the first step and just picking one thing, that you want to accomplish in a certain time frame, and allow yourself to stay in that one thing, and don't let the noise come in.
Yeah. And that brings up a great point. And I know we talked about this last week with throwing out, when you have this reinvention, throwing out who you were completely because you want to go over here and you've got this new thing. Sometimes we do 2 things that are detrimental. One is all the strengths we've built up. Like we just throw them away because we're doing this now, right?
Yeah.
Instead of going, okay, well, what translates? What comes through? Let's make sure I bring that in. But then also when we do that shift, when you reinvent yourself and you're starting this new path, you're at the bottom, you're at the beginning, you are at that level. And then that compounds because you're looking around at all the people further down the road than you. And so what you just talked about, taking that 20 years of experience, for me, it was bringing in, video skills, interview skills, making movies, like all these things. Okay, bring that into business, marketing, stuff like, okay, these are transferable skills instead of just throwing it all in the trash. And no, I want to be known as this and I want to do this, right? And so that's a key point. I wanted to make sure, people grabbed that because that's something that will come up for folks.
Always, because it's so easy to, and we have to be careful with the language that we use. It's so easy because I remember this like a year and a half ago. I would always say like, well, I'm starting over. And I would lead conversations with that sentence. And then after a while, somebody like fact checked me. They're like, whoa, hold up, back up. You're not starting over. This is a continuation of who you are. You're just redirecting. You're redirecting your life in on a path. And I was like, oh my God, yeah. And
it's that smack in the face. And you're like, oh yeah, thanks.
Because I really didn't believe that. I felt like I had to justify to people why I was walking away from over 20 years in one industry doing one particular thing, maybe two. And now I was going in like a 180. I felt like I owed people an explanation. And no, I didn't. It's a nice to know, but it's not like, it's not going to make or break what's ahead of it. That's how I feel now. Yeah.
And that's the thing, like it's an out for you, right? Like, well, I'm starting this new, I'm brand new at the, it's like you're trying to give yourself a safety net when you're introducing yourself to folks and all that. And then, you're like, all right, that needs to stop.
That's not going to make me any more credible. Maybe it will, but once people get to know who I am and they hear me speak and they know where my heart is and they know what I've done, and they see results, I don't have to fluff that up. None of us do. We don't have to fluff it up. It's what ifs.
Yeah, and that's the beauty again of our world now. Sales has evolved, networking has evolved, like we talked about. But this is another thing. Just career shifts, life shifts, is so accepted now as opposed to
love it.
20, 30, 50 years ago. Yeah, and so a lot of us still react that way with that older mindset a little bit when we try to like, okay, I'm doing this thing now, but really we just don't need it. Like it's an evolution. Awesome. Yep. People are doing it every day. And this is an answer, for folks that everyone's got to just, it really comes down to deciding for themselves, their circumstances, their lives. But that first step that we've been talking about, it all depends on what that reinvention is. It might be something that, we hear it a lot of, worked in corporate, now I'm out on my own. That's a big one. And so that question for folks, they have to decide for themselves, what does that step one mean? Does it throw everything out, quit your job, go full, is it start something on the side? That's just, there's 100 options there, and people need to just, decide their comfort level, things to weigh, pros and cons on that.
It's hard to do. I'm a visual person. I do an exercise with clients. I've done the exercise myself. When you hear certain things that inspire you, when you watch something on TV that motivates you and listen to a podcast episode or a webinar, whatever, a lot of these things sound amazing. And in that moment, you're like, wow, yes. But then when it's over, if you don't act on that right away, it's like reprimanding a child for bad behavior. If you don't address it right away when it happens, and you think that an hour or two or the next day it's going to be as impactful, it's not. You have to strike while the iron's hot. And knowing that, I'm a visual person. I believe in like writing things down. There's a very strong connection between the mind and the mouth and the mind and the hand, right? It's like a double whammy. So here's what I do. I take a piece of paper and I draw a line down the middle. And on the top of the paper, I write what that goal is. What is it that I want to accomplish? And then on one side, I write the best case scenario. And on the other side, the worst case scenario. And I list all of the things. And then I take it a step further and I write down what is an absolute necessity for me that I have to carry with me into this next chapter. And what are some of the things that I can leave behind because they really weren't serving me. And before you know it, you look at that paper and you've got like a whole sheet filled out and you wrote it. Nobody did it for you. Nobody told you what to. And that is how I was like, there's my answer. Okay.
Yeah, there's your transformational map right there.
Right. Yes. There's my blueprint, because everybody wants a blueprint. Okay, I'm a new coaching client and I'm paying you, so I need you to write me out a blueprint. I'm gonna make more money and I'm gonna be happy in my personal life and I'm gonna have better, deeper relationships and I'm gonna da 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 da. And then I'm like, well, what work did you do? You got to help me. I can't do that. We got to dig.
Right.
We're gonna dig.
Just tell me what to do. I'll do it. Like, yeah. No,
Doesn't work like that.
I like that. That's strong. So when you set out for where you are now, was there a vision of exactly the company consulting deal that you wanted to create, was it a direction?
It was purely a direction. And I can say this with full honesty right now, whether I end up scaling and having other people work with me, or I stay by myself, or I take everything that I've learned and accomplished and apply it towards an organization that I really believe in, that I feel aligned with. I don't know what that looks like. All I know is that I know the direction and I know what I want to be doing. And that's really all that matters to me. So
that's great.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to touch on this too, because that's another thing that stops us, right? If we don't we feel that tug, but we don't have that solid, because we hear that from coaches out there and everything, and they're not wrong, but they're, define your vision of exactly what you want and bring this out. And that's helpful. The more you can get clarity, the better. But sometimes it's exactly what you're talking about. That tug is a direction. It is, you can basically write a job description, right, without knowing the job, right?
Right. Yeah.
For yourself. That's like, I've got to be able to use my superpowers in this way, working with these types of people. This is my schedule. This is my, all those things, because that is clarity. Even though we don't have the thing, the it and its name and all of that up there, those elements are still clarity and a direction to go. And again,
we might not even know what that looks like, so to put pressure on ourselves to define what that end goal looks like, if it's so granular, if it's a company and if it's so structured, and then we miss, that is crushing. In my opinion, and there are plenty of people that would disagree with this, in my opinion, I think that it's easier and it's more fulfilling to have a direction and to know what that looks like, bigger, grand scheme of things, not so granular, because when you go in a specific direction, every time you accomplish something, you can celebrate the small wins, and that keeps you going. That goes back to momentum. That goes back to what Oprah said about laying the bricks. If in my mind, I'm like, well, I have to work for this Fortune company and have this position, this title by this time, and if I miss the mark, it is going to completely shut me down. And I'll probably want to quit what I'm doing and go back to something else. So I'm not going to set myself up for failure like that. I won't.
Yeah. And I think it is a constant balance, right? Of having that direction, push yourself. And again, this is the self-awareness. This is the internal work, knowing that, having those goals, having those directions, and we all know in here, if, we didn't hit it because circumstance, whatever, or I was just really screwing off. I gotta get better at this. Like it's not saying that just like, oh, whatever happens, happen. We still work and we still do that internal work. It's still a matter of picking a direction and following that pull and that tug.
But we want instant gratification. That's the society that we live in. And if it takes a little bit longer, it's so easy to start to get a little, doubtful, and maybe I'm not cut out for this, and maybe this is really not my calling, and maybe I was wrong, and and that's normal. I went through that a lot.
Yeah.
That's when you have to learn how to finely tune your compass, right? Your moral compass, your emotional compass. Like you have to trust that and stop shushing it. So that's what I learned.
And again, to your point about momentum, the more you listen, the more you feed that, the more you act on that gut feeling, the better, the more it opens, it talks to you more. You find all those things, and the better your compass works.
You have to be tuned in, and you have to pay attention to how you feel in those moments where you are on cloud 9 and you feel productive and you feel purposeful and you feel good about yourself. You have to pay attention to what you're doing in that moment and why, because that will guide you. The same way, if you check yourself when you feel crappy, where you are, who you're with, who you're talking to, and what the circumstance is, when you become more tuned into that, it will guide you where you're supposed to go.
I love it. So who needs to reach out to you? Who needs to connect with Michelle and get going on reinvention?
I know. Anybody out there, male or female, it doesn't matter age or industry actually, but if people are in a sales position or a sales leader and they really believe that there's a better way to bring in everything of who they are, where they've been, what their talent is, there is a better way to humanize this whole process and get the same results, but moving away from everything having to be scripts and automation and just cold
transactional. Yeah.
Exactly. It's not transactional. It's a human interaction. And there are still metrics and KPIs and quotas and goals. And I get that. There's structure. But if there are people out there that know that there's a better way to do it, where they can really show up as their whole self every day, those are the people that I want to talk to.
Fantastic. Where can they find you? How do they best reach out?
I'm on LinkedIn most of the time. That's my playground. I get the best feeling and feedback from my community and my network. So I'm on LinkedIn as Michelle Hecht. And I also have a company page on LinkedIn called Phoenix Factor Consulting. And then they can reach out to me by email or text me or call me by phone. So all of my contact information is on LinkedIn, but my email is michelle@michellehechtcoaching.com.
Perfect. Michelle, thank you so much. This has been a blast. I think anybody who's taken all this in and is considering that reinvention, it's got to be a breath of fresh air, a relief to know like, oh, all that stress I'm feeling, I'm supposed to be feeling that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's so many people out there that are feeling this and thinking this. And I love bringing those people together. So I started a fireside chat, like a happy hour. I started it recently, and it's most likely going to be Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. It's a group Zoom. It's very interactive. So that's also on LinkedIn, all the information about that too. But I love bringing people together because we're not alone. There are so many people that are thinking about it, talking about it, and want help doing it, about reinventing themselves.
I love it. Thanks so much for being here.
All righty.
Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of this show. If you ever need help building out custom strategies for your business or deciding what actions to take next, head over to MediaLeadsCo.com and let's connect. I'll talk to you soon on the next Strategy and Action.